In this presentation, we're looking at independent and dependent clauses. So to start, a clause is a group of words with a subject and a predicate. So in these examples over here, you see in both of these, he studied and because he studied, those are both clauses. And in both of those, the subject is he and the predicate is studied. So to break down the difference between independent and dependent clauses, an independent clause can be a sentence by itself. So if you look at this clause here, he studied. If you capitalize the H at the beginning and put a period at the end, you would have a sentence. He studied, period. That's a complete thought. And that makes sense if we think about the meaning of the word independent. If you're an independent person, you are good by yourself. You do not depend on anyone else. If you were a clause, you would be your own sentence. A dependent clause, in contrast, cannot be its own sentence by itself. So the example over here, we still have the he studied, but now we have a because in front of it. So if you think about that, you could not just capitalize the because and add a period at the end and have a sentence. This makes sense given the meaning of dependent, right? If you are dependent on someone else, you cannot be a sentence by yourself. You can't hang out on your own. So a dependent clause is dependent on an independent clause to make a complete sentence. So here at the bottom, I noted that here's an example of how to put that dependent clause in a sentence. Because he studied, he passed the test. That because he studied dependent clause depends on he passed the test to be a complete sentence. So we use dependent clauses because they add depth and detail. The examples on this page all take one of the International Sustainable Development Goals and add a dependent clause to give it more depth or more detail. You'll notice in these that dependent clauses can go either before or after independent clauses. Either way works. So one purpose for dependent clauses is to explain. So in this example, I wrote, it is important to eliminate poverty because people can't reach their full potential if they are struggling to survive. So that dependent clause explains why it is important to eliminate poverty. The second thing that dependent clauses can do is compare. So they can get two ideas into a sentence together and show the relationship between them. So this example is, although it is important to protect animals that live on land, it is equally important to protect those that live in the water. So puts those two ideas together and shows that they're equal ideas. And then lastly, they can add specificity. So they could explain the specific circumstances in which you would want to care about something or you'd want to do something or something happens. So in this example, if we want good health and well-being for all, we must ensure that everyone has access to clean water and sanitation. So this goal matters under the specific circumstances that we want good health and well-being for all. I'll also just note that I put at the bottom of this slide some common words that we use to start dependent clauses. There are many others, but some really common ones that are useful are because, although, when, after, before, if, and why. So last slide, another nice thing to think about dependent clauses as doing is taking statements that might be too simple on their own and adding depth or making them more complex. So if I start with the sentence, children should usually trust what they learn in school, that's a pretty broad statement. I haven't really explained why, and I haven't really shown whether it's always true or if there's other specific circumstances. So I can strengthen this by adding reasoning. Because knowledge is important, children should usually trust what they learn in school. So that makes my statement more trustworthy. And then if I want to make it even better, I can make it more complex. Reality is not simple, right? Simple sentences don't usually explain the world. So this adds complexity. Children should usually trust what they learn in school, although they should also be aware that curriculum can sometimes be biased, right? So that takes us away from that absolute statement and shows us reality. Hopefully, most things that your teachers tell you are trustworthy, but we want to pay attention to whether some perspectives are being shown over others or whether there's other kinds of bias. All right, so that is it for dependent clauses. I'm looking forward to seeing your writing with lots of those in there.